Yeah, let's do it. Fuck it.
Dan, I have a confession. I have a confession to make. I must bear my sins before the podcast audience. I've been digging.
You've been digging?
I've been digging. Lord, have mercy on my soul, Dan. I've been doing some digging.
Yeah, there was something that I read that was like digging and plowing and putting manure in the ground. I was like, okay,
You're like,
you've
no
lost
way.
me. You've lost me, diggers.
I know. God damn them. I ran out of compost at the allotment, more or less, and I have like 30 seed potatoes that needed using up. They're just taking over my flat, and I just had to get rid of them, so I had to dig. And dig I did, and I feel kind of bad about it. But what are you going to do? Potatoes in the ground. I still have like 10 goddamn seed potatoes I didn't know what to do with. I put one in like an empty like bucket. I was just like, I had too many potatoes. I don't know what to do with them. But that's my confession, Dan. I've been doing digging after all of our long conversations about the virtue of no-till.
Not digging.
I've fallen. I'm a fallen digger. Sadly. What are you gonna do? Stop digging, I guess.
I'll absolve you of your sins.
Oh, thank God. Let the trial by podcast.
Yeah, I don't know about the audience.
yeah, we don't know what they're gonna do.
Yep. They may not be out for you. Pitchforks and
Jesus.
Well, they're all no dig, so they probably don't have like pitchforks. They've probably got like little trowels.
They've just got sticks
They're
with nothing
sticks.
at the end.
They're dipping sticks.
Yeah, dipping stick. I would love a dipping stick. My God.
Yeah, I think you just have to like sharpen down a broom handle.
Yeah, I think so. And it was so funny. I was watching like Charles Dowding's videos, and I was like, "Wow, that's such a good stick he's got. I wonder how he made that." And I was like, "It's just a stick."
It's not. It's like a spade handle.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, how did he do that?
What a complicated piece of tech.
Yeah, so my technology pretty much ends.
Basically in keeping with the mid-17th century.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, goodness. Well, Dan, spring is in the air.
It's been amazing, hasn't it?
It's been
really
amazing.
lovely.
Literally the perfect temperature for our American listeners. It's been about 72, 74.
I was thinking about this today, yeah. We're touching on 20 degrees. So, yeah, what is that's translated? 17
About the 70s.
Fahrenheit.
It's
70
beautiful today and yesterday. And then I think we're
it's
gone.
It's done now. It's done now.
That was our spring.
But yes, everybody already knows, so it's not worth saying. But yeah, the clock's changed and the days feel long.
Changed. Oh my God!
Feels like summer. The world feels like barbecue. It smells like barbecues. Everybody's got their shorts on. Everybody's wearing their nice dresses. Everybody's really going for it. We just drove past the park and it was full of people sitting in small groups.
Yeah, we are officially allowed legally
to actually meet people outside.
to sit with people outside. Remember when the like conservative estimates were like, guys, last year, they're like, this will be over by June. Don't worry about it. That was like, whoa, maybe July. Feels like July of last year. Jesus. But yeah, I know spring's here because I saw my first pasty, bold, fat, really sunburned British man today. And I was like,
Did he have his shirt off?
He did. Of course he did. And like the top of his belly was sunburned.
You saw a British arse crack.
Yeah, exactly. It's the British version of Punxsutawney Phil. Oh, goodness. Wow, what a time.
Good for you.
Yeah, well.
Should be on all the tourist brochures.
Yeah, come to England. What was I going to say? Something about... you said it smelled like barbecue. Did you notice today in town, all day, this could just be me having a stroke, it smelled like... There's like a weird smell in town. It could have just been barbecue, but for some reason, I was just walking back from the allotment and it smelled like burnt, like pizza crust, like everywhere, at the allotment, here, everywhere. I was like, what's going on today? Okay. There's just a weird smell hanging around town.
I did not smell the burnt pizza crust, I'm afraid. So it may just be you.
Could be me having a stroke. What are you going to do?
I'll keep an eye on him, folks.
Thank you. I'm fine. I'm doing fine.
He seems all right.
Half of his face is slanted, but you know what are you going to do? Dan, you went for another swim today.
I went for another swim.
Bit of a wade, perhaps?
Yes, it was 3 hours after high tide, so there was no getting out of your depth or anything. And it was silty underfoot and sinking into the quicksand. It was a very strange experience. Yeah. But it was relatively warm.
Yeah.
And I stayed in longer than I normally do.
Didn't scream?
I don't think so.
All right.
I waded out to my middle and then sort of paced around for quite a long time. It's so much easier to get all the way in when it's like 2 steps and you're in, like fully submerged out of your depth. Like it's quite a big barrier when you're just like, I've actually got to take a plunge.
Yeah. The beach here is more or less, we've said this before, the Thames. So it's more or less kind of just like a long walk in relatively shallow water when the tide's as it was.
Yeah, it was very silty today, so it probably looked very much like the Thames as well.
Such is life.
But it was a nice thing to do. We got there and we're like, are we going to really do this? But
how long have you been doing that for? You've been doing it for have you come around for a full year? Seasons?
Not quite. I suppose not. No, I suppose started going semi regularly at the end of spring, beginning of summer last year.
Gotcha.
And went a fair few times during the summer, and then I've gone semi regularly through the winter. So I suppose maybe I can count as having done a winter of what would you call
Polar bear
it?
plunges.
Sea swimming. Although I don't do a great deal of swimming.
Sure.
To sort of get in and get back out again. So ice pool plunges perhaps.
Yeah, seasonal wades.
Yeah. Just tempting hypothermia.
Yeah. So not this time. I was thinking because around here, back in the day, there's a bit of England not too far from us called Thanet, as we both know. Thanet, for the royal listener, used to be an island, and they still call it the Isle of Thanet. It took me a very long time to figure out why they call it that, because it's not an island. And this was because of changing sea levels, et cetera, et cetera. This part of England used to be an island. And so when you kind of take the train from there, that's like the very southeast corner of England, the little tip. You do notice that like there are cliffs and stuff where like it would have been an island, and then you kind of come back more towards like London, and it kind of like valleys out a bit, and it's very flat, and there's not much there. And we were just talking about this recently. The implications of climate change in this part of England aren't great. In fact, they're pretty bad. For anybody who lives in that little dip, might not be great. Might not be too great. And I never thought about that before, but like Jesus. Ugh. Oh well.
I was being told about a. I suppose it's a sci-fi novel. It's a post-apocalyptic novel, I suppose, which is set in Kent. I think it's called Ridley Walker, and Thanet is once again an island.
The People's Republic of
yeah, but I don't recall anything more about the plot or what the people of Thanet were like then.
Fish people.
Yes, quite.
People around here are really
what their relationship to the plot is.
Oh, okay. They're just sitting
But yes, I think Canterbury might be at the coast again.
Yeah. If you look at maps, like the Stour, basically, like the ocean almost came all the way up to Canterbury. If not It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, there are several places you can, if you go. I mean, obviously, you've already said if you go out towards the proverbial Isle of Thanet, you do cross this long stretch of very flat land, which is very noticeably different to lots of the other terrain kind of thing. Like it clearly is a very low basin kind of thing. And also, if you go to the south coast, Romney Marsh is very similar. That all would have been underwater once. And if you go there, it's very strange because there's all these towns that are like new place.
That's cool.
And there's also like old. There's that old Romney and new. I don't know whether new Romney, but there's all these places that were old and new variants where like the old version used to be the coastal.
Oh, that's interesting.
Town, but now
wow,
either been replaced or been totally depopulated or like
cool.
It's
kind of horrifying.
There were some quite significant. I don't quite know enough about this, but I'm going to talk about it anyway.
Yeah, that'll be the whole episode today.
There is a slightly sensationalized story, which I think may well have happened, but is not in itself responsible for the entire shift in the coastline of Kent. But there was a really dramatic storm in like 12 something, which there's a river there, the River Rother, which is supposed to have entirely changed its course as a result of this storm, and so certain towns that used to be that suddenly were not at the coast, they were at the coast, and huge numbers of places were flooded. And yes, Yeah. So I did. There is a walk all the way around the Saxon shore where you can walk the old Saxon coastline kind of thing.
Pretty cool.
And I walked a portion of that last summer.
Huh.
And it was you could very noticeably, like, we were suddenly walking along a cliff, and then we were very clearly dropping down onto what would have been the water, and then you go up onto what would have been very clearly used to be an island and now isn't, kind of thing.
Oh,
and
cool.
Sort of like drop down the other side and walk across this other flat kind of things. Very interesting topography where you can very clearly see what it would have been like 800 years ago.
Oh, that's crazy. What do you think the naming conventions are going to be for?
And if you go to somewhere like Rye, like, it's very clearly a town that used to be on a cliffside, but the sea is gone, so it sort of just peters out, and then you're on the flat again, kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah. What do you think the naming conventions are going to be for when Old Romney is now back on the shore?
Yeah. Is it new or old? Yeah, new old, or
new old Romney.
new or old new, or yeah.
There's like some family that's been there for 800 years. They're like, we were waiting.
Romney the Third.
Yeah, they're like coal barons. They're like, we just wanted this to happen so we get our coast back.
Yeah.
Speaking of England,
coastal
Dan,
topography.
Speaking of, well, not really coastal topography. Speaking of Kent, speaking of digging, speaking of my perhaps lack of knowledge about certain things, we're talking diggers today, Dan.
Yes.
We're talking true levelers. I'm excited.
I'm excited as well, yeah. I'm not sure where it's going to go. I'm not sure what's going to happen. I'm not sure whether we've read from any of the same materials, so it's going to be a bit more informal, perhaps, hopefully.
This is going to be a combined.
We can combine our knowledge.
Yeah. So I read...
Some kind of, like, synthesis.
Yeah, exactly. Some kind of ultra brain. I read...
Arch-reactionary.
Indeed.
Well, no, not quite.
I read Arch-revisionist. Yeah. Eduard Bernstein, 2 chapters from his Cromwell and Communism, specifically chapters 9, The True Levelers and Their Practical Communism, and chapter 10, The Communistic Utopia of Gerrard Winstanley, as well as I attempted to read something that Gerrard Winstanley himself, who we'll get to, the dude, the absolute dude.
I'm impressed.
I'm extremely impressed. Wrote, called The Law of Freedom in a Platform, which is kind of like a little utopian. That's ostensibly what I read. Fill us in for what you read.
I read from some of the same texts, some portions of the same texts, and also dipped into a little bit of Christopher Hill, the famed sort of like premier historian of the English Civil War and that sort of period.
Yeah. I don't know much about Christopher Hill, and I only really skimmed what you read, but is he someone, what are his politics? Is he
I think he's on the left, yeah.
Okay.
I wouldn't be able to place him beyond that.
But he isn't like someone who's like, I'm out here, like I'm a trot or something like that. Like, or maybe he is. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, he might be one of these historians who was associated with the Communist Party of Great Britain, may well have separated himself from them. That's one of the major 20th century turning points where large numbers of people left Orthodox communism.
Large people as well.
Large people and large numbers of people. Whether it was like the Prague Spring or whatever.
Sure, yeah. Well, I'll be honest. I
think he's someone who's also quite interested in like literary study as well as like history. So and the overlap of the two kind of thing.
Yeah, I every time I've kind of like gone to read about the levelers, the true levelers, the diggers, all those fellas, I've pretty much only ever come across like fleeting references and like brief summaries of what the true levelers and the diggers were all about. And mainly people just focus on the levelers. And so I was really impressed reading the Bernstein and the Hill, like really what they were up to. Because like Gerrard Winstanley was kind of like the kind of like main person you can point to as like leading the true levelers, the diggers and all that.
Primary intellectual.
Yeah. I was so like, wait a minute, he was talking about what? It was so cool. I was impressed, I'll say that. Thank you, Gerrard Winstanley.
Yeah, very interesting period of history. I mean, this is I mean, you may well know more about the English Revolution than I do.
See.
And so my general understanding of the events and also the significance of certain dates and certain events and how they fit in with other goings on. Not entirely sure about.
Sure.
Clearly a pivotal moment in British history, but also in the history of the development of capitalism. A whole series of conflicts that were clearly resulting from developments associated with the onset of capitalism.
Sure.
Like primarily enclosure, but like sort of like the developing structure of wage labor, I think, and the kind of like developing marketization.
And improvements in closures, more specifically agricultural stuff for sure.
And how that was affecting the population. And provoked a huge diversity of thought, and its most sort of radical wing was the true levelers. I've got this book from Christopher Hill. It's called The Experience of Defeat, and I've turned to it several times looking for reference to the Diggers. And I had no idea that the Diggers and the true levelers were the same people.
Wait a minute. What the hell?
So I was pleased to find this book does indeed. I mean, clearly I didn't look very far or very hard. So yeah, who knew? The Diggers, the true levelers,
who
same
did
characters.
Know? Did they know? I don't know.
How do you? Should we try and differentiate the levelers and the true levelers?
Yeah, let's try and frame it a bit. Yeah. Just frame like 17th century England a little bit and how these people were kind of like all coming together.
Go on then.
So it all starts with a guy called Caesar.
Really?
No, so I mean, yeah, I guess how far back do we need to go? I mean, the king at this point, who will eventually be executed, King Charles, was a little big for his britches, perhaps. And I mean, there has always been...
kings are wont to be.
As kings are wont to be. Fair enough. It's kind of in their job description. And there had always been tension between Parliament as it existed then, kind of like coming out of the Magna Carta way long ago, and even before that, like Anglo-Saxon, just like get-togethers of the boys, as I believe they called it. And it kind of all came to a head when Parliament didn't really want to give him tax money, didn't really want to do much, and he just said, okay, we're just not going to have Parliament meet. This is a very cursory, glimpse about what happened. And so, that's the political angle of all this. There wound up being several civil wars between Parliament and the king. But I think what we need to take from that is that there were three poles of power, and not just the Parliament and the king, the royalists and parliamentarians, the Roundheads and the Cavaliers, but that there was this huge third pole of power, which eventually became the army. Because a lot of the kind of like radical ideas, not as radical as the true levelers, but people like the levelers came out of the army. So there's a famous guy named John Lilburne who put forward what were very radical ideas when he basically said that, okay, Oliver Cromwell, now that you've won, now that we have like ostensibly a secular republic, we need to make it a secular republic. We can't just change the names of everything and continue as we were. We want, I'm not going to say they wanted universal male suffrage, because I don't think that was quite true, but they wanted to expand the vote. They wanted to just have a republic, right? Mm-hmm. And so coming out of that, then, like, most of the people who wanted that were in the army because they weren't getting paid. They realized that, like, we fought this whole war that's decimated our country. I think I came across some statistic that was, like, in terms of percentages, more people died in the English Civil Wars through famine or through, attrition or just deaths on battlefields than the UK in the First World War. This is a pretty bad time, and when you're just like, I'm just not going to pay the army, they're going to be angry and they're going to be very radical. So some more like kind of, we might say, like, not quite bougie because these aren't like PB guys, like some more kind of Republican ideals came from this, where people were like, we want Parliament to do what it's going to do, and we want like equality kind of under the law. And so that's the levelers, right? I mean, and I think that's worth kind of stopping on just for a moment, because like that was pretty radical for the time, but we shouldn't let historical bias and hindsight kind of like skew our vision to basically say like, well, this was all these people were capable of coming up with it in this time period, because as we'll get to in a second, there were the Diggers, the true levelers, who were much more radical.
Yeah. One of the things that came up in the chapter on the levelers in Christopher Hill's The World Turned Upside Down, one of the sort of asides that he sort of steps into, I suppose, briefly, is to say that, okay, I'm sort of like knocking the levelers here a bit, and I'm sort of like celebrating the the forethought and the sort of the radical ingenuity, I suppose, of the true levelers.
Sure,
but let's take a moment to reflect on the fact that in actual fact, like, the levelers were incredibly radical for their time, for the things that they were trying to propose, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's also like in a similar way that you would say like Robespierre or, well, maybe like guys that came slightly more before him were really radical in the French Revolution when they were just answering the political question and not the social question. It's a similar thing here, right? And I mean, still radical, getting rid of monarchy.
Yeah.
Literally killed the king. That's pretty insane.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you could break it down in such that like the levelers were interested in political and I suppose like constitutional reform, or even just like building the foundations for a constitution, I suppose.
How did that go with this country, Dan? How's that going?
Great, yeah. Still working on it. And I suppose the true levelers much more interested in economic reform, if you were going to like break it down into simple terms like that kind of thing.
Yeah, I was interested. Bernstein made the point where he said that the levelers represented the interests of the artisan and the, heavy quotes here on my end, advanced citizen, and the true levelers were that of the laborers, right? Which I think is, it's fair, but I mean, like, I, again, would be a little hesitant to call the people in the army who are kind of putting forward these ideas of, like, the levelers as kind of, like, more advanced citizens, because a lot of them were just, like, we want to get paid, and we, like, you don't need to be PB, petty bourgeoisie, to see that, like, suffrage is a good idea and that, like, we need to expand the vote and, like, we should get the things that were promised. So I thought that was, like, maybe a bit of, like, a misanalysis on his part, but...
But I suppose, like, yes, yeah. I mean, from what I read, from my understanding, their political base of strength was in metropolitan areas. This is the levelers, and as you say, the army. Now, I don't know through the history of the 17th century, like, what periods of time there was a huge standing army or army mobilized, or various armies mobilized, and when they were demobilized, kind of thing. So we might be talking about different periods where when the army was active, there were all these people who were riled up and ready to hear these messages from what Bernstein was. Did Bernstein say the sort of advanced citizens? Whereas when sort of things nominally normalized, like their base of support was, the levelers' base of support was largely in the cities. One of the things that Hill says was that, like, even if the levelers had successfully achieved the reforms politically that they were looking to achieve, there was no actual constituency that was actually going to elect them. They would have had to do a huge amount of work, sort of like convincing the newly enfranchised British population, like, to actually vote for them, kind of thing. So they were clearly a sort of like minority opinion, I suppose.
I also think that the army just gave them a very literal base from which to, like, spread their ideas really easily, because a lot of the ways that the levelers, John Littleburn, like, especially, whenever he wrote anything, even when he was in prison, he would get people in the army to, like, contribute, like, every week or so, like, you know, half a day's wage to basically, like, get the money to print these things, these pamphlets, and then, you know, send someone to, like, another army camp to spread them out. And so the army definitely played, like, a huge role in just the very literal, like, how many people they were able to get to listen to them.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that for the levelers to have had any huge amount of success, they would have had to win much more support in the army and basically take over the army. Do you know anything about the new model army? Do you know how they sort of fit into this whole...
I mean, I think that the reason that the army was able to become such a big pole of power was obviously because Cromwell and all those guys, like, relied on them extremely heavily. And just, they had to just keep lying to them about what they were going to promise them to keep them loyal. But I mean, I think just in the act of creating an army that, at least ostensibly, wasn't run by, like, the equestrian class of the nobility, and you wouldn't just get, you know... Like, you wouldn't just get an assignment in the army as an officer just because you were born in, like, some castle, you know what I mean? Just purely in the act of doing that.
A modern army, the structure of a modern army internally didn't necessarily reflect anymore the structure of society kind of thing. It wasn't like your knights and your lords.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go too far in that because, like, I know
armies of peasants. It was a more formalized army.
Exactly, a more modern one. Army, yeah, and I mean, like, I don't want to go too far in that because, like, Cromwell, I don't think Cromwell was nobility. I think he was just kind of like some guy, but he must have been relatively well off, right? And I mean, like, other guys like Fairfax and stuff like that, like, I would imagine that they were probably. I don't want to say this, like, because they might not have been, but, like, I would imagine that while there was some kind of, like, merit-based system in the army, it was also like, oh, if you're willing to, like, betray the king and come fight for us, we'll give you, like, a good assignment as well. So it wasn't, like, obviously, like, a perfect meritocracy in the army, but just by the fact of formalizing the army structure, they realized what power they had, and they were able to be like, oh, we would like to get paid and have land that you offered us. And also, like, I think this is pretty telling. Like, a huge part of their demands were, like, what's the word? Not persecuting people on either side, because they were like, we don't want to be persecuted if they win, but, like, equally we have no interest in persecuting the, like, schmuck who lived across the street from me who just got conscripted into the other army. You know what I mean? Because they were kind of just like, this is just about the king and the nobility. We kind of don't really care, you know? So I guess that leads to, like, a bit of a part about it.
Yeah, a lot of the demands seem to have been not being punished for things that have happened during the war.
Which, like, what were you guys doing?
Yeah, what were you up to? But I mean, if you're going to try and sort of, like, mobilize those large armies, like, people are going to want to know there's going to be an out kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I would imagine that they weren't able to get all of the supplies that they needed, perhaps legally.
Yes.
So maybe they did some things that weren't very nice. But before we get any further, anti-Cromwell podcast. I think we can both agree on that. We're definitely not out here being pro-Cromwellites.
Not a good guy.
Not a good bloke. Lilliburn I kind of like.
Up to some antics.
Up to some antics. Our Irish comrades probably are not fans either. Sure. And I think that we can agree with them on that. Should we get into talking about our boys? The true
our absolute boys.
Our absolute boys. I think it is funny because, like, levelers was kind of like a chop at first, I think, because it was like...
It seems to have been a term that's been bandied around long before this period, from what I understand. Like, people have been accused of being levelers as almost this sort of, like, pejorative...
yeah, exactly. And
so I won't say that. Attack.
Exactly. And I think that's why it's kind of funny that, like, the people who were being called the diggers hated diggers so much, the word diggers so much, that they were like, we're the true levelers. It's like, well, that's also kind of a chop. It's like, oh boy.
I didn't really, everybody's just, everybody's known by the thing they were, like, for the pejorative name they were given by their opponents.
Yeah, exactly. So we get to these good people. So like we were saying, where the levelers just kind of wanted a secular republic, and that was kind of it. And, like, we should eventually talk about religion because that plays a pretty massive role in all this as well. Yeah. But for now, just to say that, like, the diggers, the true levelers, whatever you want to call them, they ostensibly wanted complete common ownership, abolition of private property, and basically, like, just the right to live, because this was a bad time for just normal people.
Yeah. I mean, the point of time that we're really interested in focusing on is what 1649.
Yeah,
is when, like, when, like, the activities for which the diggers are best known all happened in a few months span, basically, exactly. in spring of 49. It didn't go well.
It didn't go well.
But the 1640s sound like they were terrible. I mean, I imagine the whole period was pretty rough, but the 1640s sound like they were really awful.
Bad harvests.
Yeah, terrible harvests. And so the sort of, like, the contradictions in that society were made far more apparent. The distinctions between the rich and the poor, the sort of, like, the shortages of food, whilst the sort of enclosure process was continuing or in people's minds or sort of a present thing. So I suppose, like, it was very easy to build this narrative whereby what was quite rightly the source of people's woes, or something that was really, like, pouring gasoline on the fire of the 1640s were these sort of really stark class distinctions, or disruptions to society that were coming about because of this sort of developing new mode of production.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to find the revolution that doesn't begin with a really crappy harvest.
Or a war.
Or a war, yeah, exactly. I'm just going to read a little bit from Gerrard Winstanley's The Law of Freedom and a Platform real quick, just to kind of say what these people were about. So this was basically what this was half letter to Oliver Cromwell to be like, listen, dude, don't mess this up. And I know that what you're going to do and you're going to mess it up. Here's what the people actually want. They don't really give a shit about your political demands.
This 1652 was this written?
This was 1652. Yeah. And also part like utopian outline for a new society, which I didn't know anything about this, and this rocked. So I'm just going to read a quick paragraph. I'm going to kind of have to translate part of it. He says, no man can be rich, but he must be rich either by his own labors or by the labor of other men helping him. That's pretty classic. We know all about that. That's just, people who
collectivity.
are rich. Yeah, exactly. And also just like the people who are rich, they're not doing it by their own labor.
Sure.
The people who own all of this land, they're not working the land, basically. If a man have no help from his neighbor, he shall never gather an estate of hundreds and thousands a year. And if other men help him to work, then are those riches his neighbors as well as his, for they be the fruits of other men's labors as well as his own. It's kind of the same thing, basically. Like, you can't say that, just because you own this land, quote unquote, that everything that it makes is yours because you're not the one making it. But all rich men live at ease, feeding and clothing themselves by the labor of other men, not by their own, which is their shame and not their nobility. For it is a more blessed thing to give than to receive. But rich men receive all they have from the laborer's hand, and what they give away other men's labors, not their own. This dude, Bernstein makes a point where he's like, this dude knew his political economy. Like, he's not wrong. And it's so, I don't know, it's so cool to read something like this from so long ago, because you think of, it's hard not to like look at the feudal mode and be like, if only they, had someone like Marx come along and outline it all for them. But it's like, this is all pretty straightforward. And what Marx is getting at in Capital, like, obviously a lot more complicated and a lot more in depth, but like the basic idea is that like, the people doing the work should have the things. And it just rocks to see it.
Yeah. And what's nice to hear included in that is the sense of not like one man in this sort of like gendered speech, but
this
like
gendered utopia.
The work of one man is his own to some extent, but the work of a collectivity belongs to that collective kind of thing. There's so much space in this for people working together and benefiting from that collective labor.
Absolutely.
And so much of this economic model is basically about a society whereby there are collective stores of resources which everybody draws from what they need, kind of thing. So it would be so easy to imagine this as being like a kind of like parcelize the land and let everybody have their due, and then they'll sort of like work at their own kind of thing. But it's not about that at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very explicitly a kind of like a collectivized.
Yeah.
It's communism, folks. Like, it's
communism,
very explicitly communism. I mean, that seems to be another term that has a history that, seems to go back as it presumably in different iterations and different understandings, different words perhaps, but like you could definitely trace the word and the idea of communism probably as far back as there have been collectives of human beings that didn't live under what Marx might have called primitive communism.
I think Marx specifically drew, it could be wrong on this, I think he drew that from Epicureanism, which was a very long time ago. But also, like, you see why anarchists also lay claim to like the diggers as well, because it's like, I don't know, maybe communism in its true form is actually just a lot closer to like collective living and like collective production of things than we would think, as kind of what you're saying. It's just like, give everybody the thing and they'll work it. That kind of just, if that's your idea of communism, then perhaps it's a little bit not quite communism. If you see what I'm saying. Like if your view of communism is just like give everybody their land and allow them to like work it as they see fit and like compete in some sort of like market economy.
I see.
That isn't what he's saying here. It's a lot more communal.
Yeah, this is far more radical than some anarchists. Right?
Yeah, true.
Obviously it's a different time, and they're working with different sort of material conditions. And it's probably they're probably able to be so, or Winstanley is able to be so radical because of the time of history in which he is witnessing, kind of thing. Like,
Sure.
there is still this period of time where most people live off of the land, say, like live in the countryside, are agricultural workers of some sort or other. Although this isn't explicitly a philosophy for organizing a society of agricultural workers, kind of thing. Like his broader political theories or policy program, I suppose.
Yeah, he's a policy wonk.
He's a policy wonk indeed. Is very much orientated toward sort of like people having and developing different skills and sort of like fulfilling different needs for a society. It's not just everybody has to go back to being an agricultural worker, kind of thing.
Yeah, this is definitely not competition, is what he's saying. It's definitely like working towards.
Sure, yeah, but it's also
common
not.
good.
It's also not like celebrating like the primitivism
Sure.
or the sort of naturalism of
Yeah.
Sort of, I don't know.
In earlier time.
Yeah. It's that's really worth reiterating. It's definitely certainly not looking to the past.
Yeah.
It's very much like orientated toward the future. One of the things that Christopher Hill says in that chapter from The World Turned Upside Down is that Winstanley and the Diggers are basically the only people who, on the radical end of the sort of intellectual spectrum that's sort of like finding expression in this time. They're the only people that really have an adequate answer to how to actually develop Britain or English, the English economy into the future, kind of thing, to actually meet the sort of developing needs of the country.
Yeah.
Hill accuses everyone else of... Hill accuses everybody else of doing exactly what we were just saying, right? Like looking toward previous historic ways of living. They're actually trying to reinstantiate feudalism.
Yeah.
Or the sort of like the feudal rights of the peasantry, so we say, or the feudal obligations of the lords. Whereas the Diggers were obviously keen to like abolish all of that, all authority. Everybody was going to be equal for the most part. Obviously, there was some there would be elected officials, and it would seem that there was some privileging of age as well. Like, presumably, it was also very gendered.
Yeah.
So presumably, like, it was the older men who were going to be considered to be like having some kind of
pretty
natural
explicitly, yeah.
sort of authority.
Yeah.
But obviously, he's very keen, like, very obviously wanted to abolish all class, wanted to abolish the nobility, wanted to very scathing about the organized religion of its day and how that sort of like fed into the propaganda structures of the existing society, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But also it was really very clearly orientated toward development in some respects. Like they really understood the new developing science of modern agriculture as it was at the time, which basically just meant using manure to fertilize the land to make it more productive. But they definitely had in mind this idea of productivity.
Yeah.
And one of their driving principles was that if we really utilized the land of England to its utmost, we could support far greater populations than it currently does, kind of thing. No one would have to starve. No one would have to go hungry. Everybody could be provided for. And it would seem like it was largely off the back of the new developments of what was happening in agriculture.
Sure.
And one of his other sort of like proposals was that invention and sort of development of new scientific ideas ought to be really privileged and encouraged and supported. And there ought to be this system for distributing those ideas so that they couldn't be like hoarded by one person or one group, but could be used to develop the country as a whole, kind of thing, and build this like larger collectivity in the minds of the sort of people in the society kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it was definitely very like forward, future looking.
Absolutely. I mean, he explicitly says, I think at one point, where he's like, if we were to use all of the land that is now just rotting under enclosures as barren waste because it doesn't make sense in the market to use this land or something like that. It's like, if we could use all of that land, not only would everybody not be starving in like a horrible hellhole that England is at this moment, he was like, we would have more than like any other country in Europe if we were to actually put our minds to it. And I mean, yeah, that was like in a very literal sense, of course. One thing I wanted to bring up though was like, you're very right about like them wanting to look to the future as to like create something new. But something that comes back again and again in so much of like the radical end of like English revolutionary like politics was this idea of like Norman conquest as being the like beginning of all hell things. And it's really strange, right? Because like the Diggers are like generally painted as people who think that like when William the Conqueror came over, it's the Norman yoke, right? It's like the beginning of like all bad things. They bought over their laws and their horrible things, and you know the like noble Anglo-Saxon, you know, his way of life was like thrown to the side. But Winstanley in this and like the primary stuff that we read was really making the point that like he wasn't looking back to the Anglo-Saxons for what they should be doing, but there was also still this like, God damn Normans. I thought that was so strange. It's like, guys, that was like, what, 500 years ago? It's like...
Yeah, it's interesting you find that contradiction maybe in the primary text. Like the same kind of came up in Hill's description of this. Like he does make that point that for Winstanley, like Anglo-Saxon law wasn't any better than like Norman law. And also, but also at the same time, like it's, to some extent this is coming on to some of the religious metaphor, like Winstanley was very keen to play in a metaphorical way, as all of his uses of religion seem to have been, with the idea of there having been a fall.
Yeah.
And some of that sort of, some of his language still seems to like fixate around like the Norman invasion and the Norman conquest.
Yeah.
Now, initially that kind of the fixation on that by the levelers and some of the true levelers,
the new levelers. That's me.
Yeah, some of the fixation by those groups on the figure and the events of Norman conquest and William the Conqueror does seem a little bit just like, where was the sort of like primary evil that has set us on this course kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to me actually thinking. Then I did some thinking, and I was thinking back to what we read in Alan Meakson's Wood, The Origins of Capitalism, where it was in fact for her in her narrative, like the Norman conquests were really important in the development of capitalism, right? Like it was that England had this imported nobility, which resulted in a relatively small number of nobles governing really huge parcels of land.
By force at the beginning.
Yeah, quite. But like compared to France, where there were considerably more nobles, and they had smaller land holdings, and they had smaller sort of peasant populations on them, and by virtue of that fact, they were kind of like sort of constricted by that that operation, I suppose, can we say? Like it was the Norman conquest and the change of nobility in Britain which changed in vital ways, as I remember and understand for Meakson's Wood's argument. That imported nobility changed in vital ways the structure of English society such that it allowed for this developing well, I mean, I suppose it put in place the circumstances for the changes in the relationship between lord and peasant and later lord and tenant farmer, which allowed for the development of capitalism. So therefore, to some extent, they're not wrong.
Yeah, I mean,
in that their complaints were the development of wage labour, the process of enclosure, the reliance on the market, shall we say, the sort of newly commercialised world in which they live. Like so many of those things can draw their origin back to the Norman conquest. Now, perhaps they didn't know that, but like, I don't know.
The Normans, also known as the European Union. But no, yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's interesting because I think Winstanley sees a like comparison between the Normans and this new like bougie parliament, right? Because he basically says like, when he's listing everything that he's pissed off about to Oliver Cromwell, he says like, you basically just changed the king's laws for the law of the Commonwealth. That's one thing. But he also says, and I'm going to quote again here, he says that the economic evils were very great. In the country, the lords of manor still oppressed their brethren after their old fashion, exacted fines and other feudal imposts from them, and drove them from the common land if they did not pay rent. In parishes with common land, the wealthy landlords, the rich Norman freeholders, as well as the new gentry, who are said to be even more covetous than the old landlords, would overstock the commons with sheep and cattle so that the poor peasants and laborers could scarcely manage to keep a cow. So he's basically saying that, like, yeah, the old guys were bad, but, like, you guys, not only are you doing the exact same thing as the old guys, but you're doing it worse because now you have to pay for everything that everything that you know, like this war and keeping power and all of this stuff. So it's an interesting comparison between the like Norman yoke argument and then also like things being worse by the like yoke of the Parliament, Westminster's yoke, as I like to call it. But yeah, it is just very interesting. I mean, it is. I don't know. It is just it's a cool comparison between the like looking to the past as like for the source of the fall, but then also like attempting, as Winstanley was, to look to the future to how things could be better, and not just like as Cromwell kind of was, how can we keep power and keep everybody happy so that we don't have another war, basically. I suppose we should probably explain why they're called the Diggers. Praxis is the answer. They're called the Diggers. Again, that was like a pejorative term because they went and practiced what they preached. So they went and basically took over these barren enclosures with a big commune, I guess you could say, of people, and started just leveling the land out, started digging it and planting wheat because everybody needed food. And I was telling you this not too long ago, Dan, I believe, that the most famous of these encampments was in what is now Surrey, I think. And I looked it up on Google Maps to see what it was today, and it's a golf course. It's the worst thing on the planet. So the site of perhaps England's most radical moment is now a golf course, which is pretty cool.
Must have been quite a sight to all the locals. These folks just showed up and took over this piece of barren land, St George's Hill, and told there were only a few of them, and they told the locals more will come, and gradually more came, and they built this encampment, and they started to cultivate the land. And this happened all over the country, actually. Like for a while, it was considered that maybe this was the only instance of it happening. But it seems there's limited information about where these various encampments were, but it's clear that the true levelers, or at least the philosophies that were the foundation for the true levelers, had a huge amount of support throughout sort of all of agricultural England, kind of thing.
Yeah. And I've been wondering how that word got out. If it was just people talking to each other, or if it was more of like a leveler thing.
I mean, I think they probably had a process for
spreading their
propaganda.
The good common word.
I wonder whether they may have all just sort of set out and sort of started these camps in various places and encouraged people to join them. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Winstanley, I don't think started. I could be wrong. I think he did.
I think he was at St George's Hill.
He was, but I don't think he started it. I think he kind of showed up and like coalesced what they were saying into like words.
How were they speaking, if not in words?
Sign language. They're speaking with the spade. But yeah.
And as you can imagine, the landlords and the nobility were not best pleased.
Like, what are you guys doing? Imagine trying to use this land to feed yourself. I was surprised that Winstanley didn't get executed. Eventually.
I mean, I think Cromwell was kind of well disposed to him. No, I think kind of like. At least kind of like...
This guy's got chutzpah.
Yeah. Well, maybe to sort of deceived him into thinking that like he could have his ear, kind of thing.
Sure.
I may be speaking out of turn now.
I mean, I know there's the famous, perhaps apocryphal moment where Winstanley and one of his other digger cronies came in to meet Cromwell or somebody like that, and they refused to take off their hats. They're like, "Why aren't you taking off your hats? Do you know who this is?" And they were like, "Because we are all but men." Presumably a very grandiose way, and presumably very big floppy hats in my head.
I wonder what kind of hat.
A fedora.
Okay.
Oh, God.
Well, I can't condone that.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. I guess we should also talk about religion as well. Because we do have to remember that these were people of their time. Oh, my God, I need some water. Jesus. We do have to remember that these were people of their time, right? And this was a very religious time. And I mean, when you're taught about Oliver Cromwell in school, you're not really taught a whole lot about how insane these people were for God. Because, I mean, like, these were the people who... This is the original War on Christmas, Dan. These people wanted to cancel Christmas because they were so religious, but it seems a little insane. We've talked about our love for the pagan winter holidays on the show before.
Sure. Yeah, my only problem with this whole period is everybody seems to be a Puritan. And I'm just like...
I know.
I mean, like, it all sounds really cool, guys, but, like, I'm not really sure how on board I am with, like... the degree of work that you're probably going to demand of me.
Exactly. But I mean,
a Quaker. Everybody's a Puritan.
I will say I'm pretty pro-Quaker.
Yeah.
In the communist society of the future, perhaps not organized religion at all, they will allow the Quakers to hang out. I think why not? We like the Quakers. And all of these people, Lilliburn, Winstanley, they all wound up becoming Quakers.
Yeah.
Which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, I was saying, wasn't I? Winstanley was buried as a Quaker.
Yeah. Bless him. I mean, Winstanley's religious beliefs, because again, this is another thing that, like, in most popular histories of this period, they are perhaps rightly so, but the Diggers especially are painted as just like fanatics for God. And it was really interesting in this, because that's kind of just what I thought, because I was like, yeah, okay, he was like a dude in England in the 1600s, like he probably was. But in reading this, and in The Hill as well, he talks about the kind of like the unity of, and I suppose progressiveness, if that's the right word to say, of Winstanley's religious beliefs, because a lot of his political beliefs, right, were coming from this idea of like God is everything around us and God believes everything is equal. That's why there can't be landlords. Duh. And it's interesting because Hill makes the point that that's like bordering on a kind of pantheism, and I think the last line, right, in The Hill was something like, from Winstanley's pantheism, like eventually just we get secularism, because he was even referring to God in his writings as reason. Right?
Sure, yeah.
I was like, whoa, oh my God.
Yeah, Hill suggests that Winstanley became increasingly more kind of like materialist as his life went on, or at least like his intellectual life went on. And as you say, yeah, likens God to reason, basically, and is advocating the advance of reason. Clearly advocating... He's advocating establishing heaven on earth. I suppose.
Sounds good to me.
Like, and is obviously like opposed to mainstream religion preaching like you'll get your just desserts in the afterlife kind of thing. Now suck it up and suffer it now. Also very heavily, and I suppose really quite important is it really does seem what he's doing is using religion as a form of metaphor.
Yeah.
And building it into his arguments kind of thing. Like, clearly his argument is very much based around the idea of humanity has fallen. Fallen from the possibility of sort of like a sort of like peaceful existence between people, an existence of equality, an existence of abundance, the sort of lost abundance of the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
But as I say, like it's metaphorical in really quite explicit ways, I think, which could quite easily be interpreted as sort of like heretical, for want of a better word.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. It was, yeah.
But yeah, like clearly it all stems from sort of like nature is God's bounty for human beings, and obviously everybody's equal before nature kind of thing, and all hierarchies just sort of like this sort of like corruption of human beings.
And clergy as well. Not a fan of the clergy. I mean, he ahead of his time saw clergy and the state, and like he wouldn't call them this, but capitalists is basically all one part of the broader machine.
Sure, yeah.
Keeping the little digger down.
He was also a prison abolitionist.
Right on. Very cool.
He seemed quite keen on the death penalty, though. Or at least, like, he sort of seemed to have built it into the legal system. He was very keen for the legal system such that it would exist to be not punitive, but for sort of what we would, I suppose, nowadays call rehabilitative purposes. Although he did seem to allow the death penalty for like things like murder and rape, and also quite funnily buying and selling.
He was not do not sell anything in front of Gerrard Winstanley. Oh my God, this dude was not a fan of buying and selling.
He was going to come for you.
Yes, I mean
that is his primary evil for the most part.
Absolutely. He's Bernstein says at one point. But he was asked, will there be any lawyers? The reply is in the negative, and the reason is stated briefly and tersely. There will be no buying and selling.
Yeah, he really did seem to think that lawyers would just... Well, it would make sense for this period. I mean, we've come across this idea before, right? Like, in the Olympics, were the development of, like, legalism, and also the sort of, like, assessing the quality of land, the sort of, like, early sort of contracts and stuff like that. So you can see why it would be really important. The development of a legal system was... or a changed and new legal system that was really fixated or centered around facilitating the new sort of capitalist mode of production as it existed at the time, sort of agricultural, the nascent capitalist mode of production. So you can see why he would really set his sights on the lawyers, but boy, does he hate them. Boy, does he hate them.
He also, I think, kind of swung and missed a little bit at, well, maybe not swung and missed, but he kind of whiffed a little bit, I think, in regards to the family, because he gets to the point where he's talking about, like, oh, if we follow this logic, should we basically just, like, abolish the, capitalist family union? It's like the man ruling over the wife and ruling over everything else. And he's like, no, of course not. It's
there was one point when I was going through it, and I was like, he's talking about all the classic distinction between, like, private property and like personal property kind of thing. The old they're coming from my toothbrush meme. But he did in something that I read a quote of his where he sort of suggested that property would belong to the family. He at least didn't say it would belong to the man. Although then in his sort of like in one of these, maybe it was in the Bernstein actually, there was this sort of structure of the various tiers of his imagined society. And what authorities existed at what tiers. At a family level, he very explicitly put the sort of the father as the sort of like natural authority figure at the level of the family.
Damn. So close.
There you go. So yeah, he wasn't in favour of abolishing the family, unfortunately.
Sadly.
But we'll forgive him.
I mean, this was a dude in the 17th century, so we'll forgive him for that. Perhaps not wanting to abolish the family quite that early. I don't know. Again, I think I just kind of want to make the point that I was like stunned at how radical his points were, other than the things we've mentioned that weren't. I really like this period of history, and I was really like surprised how much I had no idea about just how radical the like true levelers were. Because again, you read anything, like I got a book from goddamn Verso, Dan, that has like all of I mean, I guess this is called the levelers, not the true levelers. It's all about the Putney debate, so kind of what do you expect? It's also a Verso book. But I mean, like, I don't know. I was really expecting them to basically just be like more on the political question and kind of just like kooky dudes who were out trying to make everybody live together and, dig for cabbages, basically. Like, I was really impressed because that's kind of just how they get painted as like, again, these fanatical anarchists.
I mean, we don't know how the actual people, we don't have that many accounts, perhaps. Maybe there are. We haven't read that many accounts of the actual people involved beyond the sort of like the intellectual heavyweight. That was Gerrard Winstanley. So some of this is skewed by sort of like Winstanley's perception of it, and clearly sort of Winstanley had built a more coherent ideology. But at the same time, you're very correct. Like they're not just like the levelers when it became apparent that the levelers had sold out, kind of thing. And I suppose you're right to draw it. A lot of it probably stems from their differing constituencies, right? Like, like one speaks to the sort of like, well, I mean, Winstanley, although not like centering in his system the sort of like the starving agricultural poor, its message is clearly cultivated toward them, or like
Sure.
it is the moral outrage of what has resulted in this sort of like terrible poverty.
Yeah.
That is motivating much of his like his thinking and much of the political action.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I would just like to read a little bit, because I pulled this book, The Levelers, The Putney Debates, presented by Geoffrey Robertson. I got this a long time ago just to kind of like see if I could get through a lot of the like leveler inspired petitions and stuff. And
is it mostly first-hand accounts?
It's entirely primary stuff, which is interesting. It's also the levelers, so all right, whatever. But I would just like to read the most insane couple of sentences I've ever read in an ostensibly left-wing book. Okay, I don't know who Geoffrey Robertson is. Could be a really cool guy. I don't know. But let me just read you this and see what you think. This is in the introduction. Today's single most important political principle, the right to live in a participatory democracy, comes down to us not from the slave-owning societies of Athens and Rome, or from the pleasant estates in France where Rousseau and Montesquieu envisioned the quote-unquote general will, but from the buff-coated and blood-stained English soldiers and tradesmen. This book lets their voices resonate again, blah, 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 blah. And then he goes on to say what is perhaps the most insane sentence I've ever read in a book. He said, "It is an abiding irony that the United Kingdom, a country that has more history to be proud of than any other, should be so reluctant to acknowledge the most significant part of it." I agree with he brings it back around at that last bit of the sentence, but more history to be proud of than any other. I don't know. Has he opened a history book for the last 200-300 years? I don't know about that. More history, you should say. A lot of history here. A lot of history. But yeah, that's Geoffrey Robertson presenting The Levelers, the Putney Debates. What do I expect from a leveler? Am I right? Shocking. Anything else we want to say about the buff-coated? I would also say the most radical moment of that of the English Civil War and the Revolution clearly did not come from the buff-coated and blood-stained army guys or tradesmen. Yeah, goddamn Putney. It clearly came from the mud-stained, feces-clad and peasant of Surrey. How crazy is it that Surrey used to be like the most radical part of England? I think that's really funny. Get us back to those days.
I've just realised if digger is a pejorative, maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they didn't identify as diggers because they didn't actually dig.
Oh my God! They were the original no-till. Oh my God! Charles Dowding's bloodline goes straight to Gerrard Winstanley.
There's the thumbnail art for the podcast.
Good Lord.
The first T-shirt.
Yeah, exactly. With Charles Dowding's face on it. Anything else we want to say about them? Again, cool stuff.
Yeah. I'm glad we did this. It's a period of history I'd like to engage with more. Obviously it would be really good to come back to this period of history. I'm losing my mic. It would be good to come back to this period of history in terms of some of the broader questions that we were sort of skirting around at the beginning, like how this fits in, how these revolutionary activities came about as a result of the sort of changing class relations, shall we say, or how much of the development of capitalism was necessitated some of the revolutionary action, some of the political changes that came about. But yeah, I can only reiterate what we've already said. Like, I, as clearly you were as well, really quite astonished by, Winstanley's writing, and it's quite inspiring. These people that just went and did it, as you said.
Just went and did it. Yeah. They just did it.
I mean, it would seem, maybe I've got this wrong. Did you ever come across this idea that they were almost like pacifistic in their outlook?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I definitely got that vibe.
They were very like they're. In some maybe that's a function of some of the religiosity. I don't know,
or just like a war,
or just a war that just couldn't be doing with it anymore. But it was very much a kind of like I don't know, like a sort of like the original peaceful protest. We're just going to go and do our thing. Yeah, let's see if they stop us.
And they did.
They did. Yeah.
That's why anarchists love this. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, it is so refreshing when you come across socialist, communist ideas in a place that you don't expect, and where it almost makes it seem as though these ideas are inevitable and obvious, because they are, because like the basic idea that Winstanley and all of these people were trying to get across was that if you make something, it should be yours, or at least like, you know, it shouldn't just go to this fat schlub sitting in some sort of throne in a mighty castle somewhere, as it literally did back then. I certainly don't want to like imply that anything is inevitable, communism's inevitable or anything like that, but like it's just refreshing. It's like these ideas are always percolating in people's minds, and for it to have been percolating in the English peasant's mind all these years ago makes me feel good.
Yeah, I mean the stark contradictions of that society led to these ideas, kind of thing. We live in an equally starkly contradictory time.
Yep.
So let's see what happens. I mean, I was reflecting on this thing that we've talked about before, where like, was it proximity to, well, two things, I suppose. Was it proximity to the actual transition into capitalism that allowed these people to like think that this other world was possible, even though, I mean, maybe we were overblowing quite how many there were and quite how, but it would seem the ideas were quite popular, even if like the active participants were. I'm not quite sure what the.
I mean, to get an audience with Cromwell, you can imagine it wasn't just a couple of schlubs.
Yeah. And I suppose also like the proximity or the ease of the idea of having means of production that were your own to some extent, or that's not quite true actually, because they wanted to they did want to collectivize the means of production, but I suppose like having such a considerably less developed industrial, I mean it wasn't industrial, was it?
Sure.
Living in an economy or an industrial or productive system which is significantly less complicated, I wonder if it makes it easier to like envisage that leap toward like collectivizing the means of production.
Sure. I mean, I think it's a confluence of a lot of things, right? Because I mean, like if you look at the French Revolution, it wasn't simply that they just had a bad king. It was that there were like crap harvests after crap harvests after crap harvests, and like, you know, perhaps there's like a genetic thing with like how horrible the nobility had gotten. And like again, we see the same thing here of like it wasn't just the king was an idiot and he had no idea what he was doing. It wasn't just that there was perhaps about to be a war with another country.
If you want to call anybody syphilitic, Jack, I'm going to give you.
I can't believe I've gotten there. I was raring to go with that word earlier today. But I mean, like, you know, it wasn't just that. It was the famines. It was these insanely destructive wars. And whenever we see like, I see what you're saying, because I always kind of come back and forth in my head of like, is it the disasters that like cause so much disarray that there is then room for these ideas to flourish? Because I like to think of these ideas as just always percolating, but perhaps they're just not given, you know, good enough soil to sprout or something like that. You know what I mean? So
more compost, Jack.
More compost.
More manure.
Yeah, more manure. If anybody would like to donate some manure to the podcast.
Maybe that's the new way to conceptualize what it is that we do here. We're just shoveling manure into the ears of the listener. Creating a fertile environment for the green shoots of socialism.
That's beautiful. I would love to hear Gerrard Winstanley's podcast. Oliver Cromwell, debate me.
Yeah, that's basically what that is, right? That what is that thing that you? That's basically his YouTube video trying to get Oliver Cromwell to respond. Kind of thing. Gerrard Winstanley with like 20 followers on Twitter is atting Cromwell with his
exactly
with his considerably longer than whatever it is 240 characters treatise.
1 of 30. Here's what's wrong with Oliver Cromwell. King. I think we can put him up there on the pantheon. Gerrard Winstanley, absolutely king.
Yeah. He might not wish to be called king.
Yeah, true.
He might even get executed for that.
So I've gone through many phases in this podcast, Dan. After the Ellen Meakson's Wood reading, I was a Maoist for quite some time. After the Murray Bookchin, I became a primitivist. But now I think we can officially seal it up. I'm going to be this for the rest of my life. I'm a true leveler, baby. Through and through. It's just rocks. All of this, not all of this, obviously. We mentioned the stuff that doesn't rock. But, like, you just love to see it.
Communist through and through.
Communist through and throw. Do you want potatoes? Because I have way too many potatoes. I'd love it if someone would just take these goddamn potatoes.
Okay. What if we just got more manure?
Well, I just don't have anywhere to put them.
You've actually run out of space.
I actually run out of space because I want to plant
just
other
put
things.
Potatoes everywhere. Oh, you want other things? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'll take some of your potatoes.
Excellent. There are aphids all over them, so don't put them near anything else.
Anything else.
That's part of the reason I was like, I just need to bury these really
Great.
quickly. Thanks, Jack. You destroyed all of my crops.
My bedroom is full of aphids.
Yeah, I would go and join St. George's Hill, the digger community, and be like, hey guys, I bought some plants. And they're like, aphids have destroyed everything.
You just bring the blight.
Yeah, exactly. Ever since Jack
Plague
showed
bringer
up.
Jack.
Yeah, everybody's got leprosy.
Nice.
What a disgusting period of history. I hate to say it. Just this is a period of time that I just think of as being literally disgusting in terms of just filth.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the peasants weren't filthy. I would imagine they kind of have it sorted out. Again, this comes back to our long-running belief in just abolishing London as a concept altogether. But god damn it, London must have been disgusting back then. My God.
I mean, it took a long time for it to get livable, I would imagine. If you would consider it livable now, I don't know.
Zing.
I mean, a lot of people live there, so.
Yeah, a lot of people do live there. That is true. All right.
All power to them.
All power to them.
Yeah.
I mean, after last week's episode, I now know that 100,000 people cut it off.
Mm-hmm.
That's enough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty on board with that because all of my favorite cities are in and around 100,000 people.
Yeah.
So cut it off there.
If it's so nice in London, why do they always feel the need to come to Whitstable?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Well, if it's so nice in London.
This is a new stage of the grumpy old men version of our podcast,
exactly.
right?
If it's so nice in London, why does it cost me £30 to get there? Why does it cost me £30 to get to London? That's insane. It's not even an hour on a train. That's insane. I don't know. I like how they brought up that the only reason people were talking about this, Bernstein I think about this, was because he was people had forgotten all about this, and then they just found all these pamphlets in the British Museum, and they were like, holy crap, this guy was a communist.
Yeah, and also I would imagine the French had gotten a bit big for their breeches.
Yeah, they're like, we need to find a communist in the past quickly.
Yeah. You know, other people have committed regicide, not just you guys. I mean, you had a fancy mechanical way of doing it, but
Gracchus Babeuf, it wasn't that cool, all right? I mean, Gracchus Babeuf, I hate to say it, does fall beneath the Gerrard Winstanley in the rankings of proto-communists, but what are you going to do?
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's start building the ranking.
Yeah.
I'd like to do some stuff on Babeuf, actually. I don't know anything about him, really.
Yeah. I don't know a whole lot either. I just feel so bad for whenever anybody tries to do anything good during a French Revolution, they're just immediately killed.
Yeah.
It's like him. Louis Blanc, again, I've defended him on the podcast before. I'll defend him till the day I die. Short King, amongst others. I don't know. Babeuf, though, mainly. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, obviously, everybody involved with the
I still get my Blanc. My Blanqui.
Blanqui. Yeah.
The Louis Blanc was the guy that lived up basically all the way to the. Oh no! I'm thinking of Blanqui was still alive in the Paris. Yeah, it would be quite tricky if Blanc was still alive in 1871. No, 1871 when he was active in the French Revolution.
No. Blanc was 1848 or 1830, I think, because he was the workshops guy, I think.
But he was still knocking.
He died in 1882.
Yeah, he was still
knocking.
Yeah, he was still knocking around in the Commune. I mean, I don't think he was at the Commune. I think he was in prison, or maybe Blanc
might have given up.
His whole history was escaping or getting somehow convincing some monarch or some leader to release him, and then immediately going off and provoking insurrection again. So I don't think he was in the Commune, but he was definitely still knocking around. Yeah,
Are you talking about Blanqui or Blanc?
I don't know, whichever one, the one that you just looked at.
Blanc was 1848. I don't know how much.
Well, you just said he died in 18.
He did die then.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah.
I just don't know how much.
I think he was an adjutant throughout.
Oh, all right. Yeah, all right.
Or an irritant.
I just always think of him as failing completely with national workshops and then just being like, I give up. Blanqui though.
Well, he just became just
a
vanguardist, didn't he? He was just
no, that's Blanqui.
We're gonna have to hash this out.
Blanqui was the vanguardist. I think Blanc was kind of I think of him as more of a bumbling fool, perhaps.
Okay. I mean, I listener, I defer to Jack's greater wisdom.
Oh no.
I mean, we'll work it out.
They're both cool. We'll say that. Yeah.
Next week we'll maybe.
Next week when we read about Louis about Auguste Blanqui, I'll become a Marxist-Leninist, and then I'll forget about the Diggers completely.
Jack is just sort of settling in his sort of like his chosen ideological.
It's like
position.
when you're like sifting something, panning for gold.
Yeah.
The big ones are staying. I'm a digger. I don't want to be anything else. Who cares?
There was a nice bit in one of the things that we were reading. I don't know whether this is of any particular relevance. Only jumping off from our reading about money last week for Capital the weekend. There's a bit where Winstanley's talking about gold and silver, and he really hates money, obviously, because he hates buying and selling. And he's talking about soon, once again, we'll use gold and silver for their sort of like material properties and not for as a sort of abstract representative.
But what's their material property?
I don't know. Jewelry.
It's shiny.
Yeah.
Like, that sounds like buying and selling to me.
Oh yeah, they were Puritans as well, so maybe they had to think about against shiny things.
Yeah, so what would you use gold for? What if he was like, we'll use it for computing and motherboards? Yeah. People are like, what the hell are you talking about?
Hey, there's a good. Also, there's a time travel. There's a time travel history. Gerrard Winstanley was actually a time traveler.
When I go crazy and I live on my allotment, and I invent a time machine, you're gonna realize that it's me. Or that.
Jack is Gerrard Winstanley.
Like, guys, have you ever read Karl Marx? They're like, who? Where's Germany? What's that? Good stuff. England, troubled history. More history to be proud of than any other. More history to be proud of.
I'm very proud.
You should be proud, but it's also like, I guess I expected this to be like a book by someone who's like at least communist adjacent, and the guy who's like, nations are good and I'm proud of mine. It's like, okay, all right.
But it sounds a bit like what he was doing, what I was just joking about, which is like trying to wrestle from the French entire ownership of like the revolutionary tradition.
This is the Norman
At least up
yoke.
to 1917.
It's just the Norman yoke. That English people still so angry about France. It's the Norman yoke.
Have you ever been to France? It's worse than London.
Yeah, well, yeah, there you go. It's like, it's not Rousseau or Montague on their pleasant estates in France, or William the Conqueror in his pleasant London.
I watched a fun French film last night. Peut-être. Have you ever seen Peut-être?
Peut-être, never heard of Peut-être.
It's set on the eve of the millennium. And
this millennium?
Yeah, it was kind of a comedy, and I was a little bit disappointed because I thought it was so basically this guy goes to this New Year's party and he's having a good time kind of thing, and he gets into an argument. I'm going to spoil the whole film for you now.
All right, yeah, okay.
But the plot is very simple. He gets into an argument with his girlfriend about potentially having kids, and then he finds this portal above the bathroom. In the roof of the bathroom, and he goes through it, and it's sort of like this room all full of sand, and he sort of keeps climbing through some other levels and finds himself in sort of like 70 years time Paris, where Paris is like covered in sand, and then he encounters his descendants, who then have to try and convince him that he needs to go back and have children so that his descendants will live.
Why sand?
Oh, Paris is just a desert. I don't know why.
Oh,
because it's the future. But it's like
sounds better than what it is.
It's environmental catastrophe run amok. But it seems like quite a nice place. Everybody's like, this is why I was a bit disgruntled, because I was like, oh, he's going to go to the future and it's going to be great. And I thought some really bleak kind of like 12 Monkeys kind of future. Yeah. And actually it's just kind of like silly, friendly, a bit camp kind of.
Yeah. Huh.
I don't know, French.
French. I will say Paris in terms of cities.
There was no subtitles, so I was having it sort of translated to me, so I may have misunderstood what the plot was entirely.
You're like, was that sand? I don't know. Paris in terms of cities, I went there and I was like, and I was like, oh, this is cool. Everything's beautiful. It's really like nice, and there's like a world-class museum on every corner. And then you like leave the like first arrondissement, and you're like, oh, that's why it's so nice, is because everything else is fucking horrible. Yeah. It's like, not to like slag anyone who lives there, but it's like Paris as a city is about as like blatant in its inequalities as you can get, because it's like you go outside of where the city walls used to be, and it's just like, oh, they don't care at all about what happens outside of the tourist zones. Fucking just brutal, dude. Invalides, though, having said that, pretty cool. not a fan of wars, but their war museum is the coolest. Dude, okay, I'm just going to say this. The only thing I'll say about Invalides, I'll say two things. One, they have an entire room which is just painted like 33 mil miniatures of like every army France ever had, which rocks. It's really, really cool.
All right. No Space Marines then.
No Space Marines. Yeah, in the future. We'll get there.
Okay.
The second really cool thing is that they have a breastplate of someone who was in... Oh, no, it wasn't the Commune. Anyway, they have a breastplate of someone who I think was in like Napoleon's army at like Waterloo or something, that it just has a hole that like the size of a grapefruit straight through it from where they get hit by a cannonball. I thought that was really cool. I was like, damn, that sucks for that dude, but like, that's pretty cool.
Right. Tomorrow, Jack, the 1st of April, is the anniversary of the occupation of Sir George's Hill.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you serious? Oh my God, I did not know that.
I'm pretty sure I read that in one of these books. I don't know what anniversary it is. What was it?
Holy crap.
49. So
somewhere 49. That's weird.
I can't do the history at all. I can't do the...
That's weird that we planned that. You know what else is weird about that is that it was just the anniversary. It is still, currently as we speak, the anniversary of the Paris Commune.
Yeah.
What's going on?
No, we didn't do anything for that, did we?
Spring. Yeah, well, spring is the
that's when...
springtime of the peoples.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's when people get up to it.
It's when they get up to it. It's when they're planting their wheat, I guess. It's nice. It's very nice. We should go to St. George's Hill and demand that it stops being a golf course.
Golf course.
This is my heritage. It's not your game.
Just go and plant potatoes. That's why you can plant your potatoes.
Oh my God. It just destroys the soil. Excellent idea. I will also say that there was somebody in here named William Jackson who was a digger. And that's my name. I was like, dude, cool. I was like, I don't know. That could have been like a Jackson. It's pretty awesome. I thought that was pretty cool. I was like, that could have been someone who was vaguely related to me. Okay, again, another thing I'm going to say is that whenever anybody talks...
when you go back in time.
Huh?
That's who you are when you go back in time.
I don't think he was a very good guy. I think he kind of screwed something up.
Yeah.
But whenever anybody talks about direct descendants, how dumb is that? I don't know. I just always thought that's so stupid. Because
because like, you're so like diluted at that point. Like, it doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah,
Not that it means anything anyway.
Yeah. I don't know. Jackson, though. That's cool.
Yeah.
I'll take that. Apparently, some of my ancestors worked on the Victory. Building Victory. It was just built at Chartham.
Interesting.
There you go. Yeah, the Jacksons. All right. Well, I think we learned enough about Jack's history for now. That rocked. I love that. Dude, just these, not to like build us up or anything. These last few episodes, I've loved everything that we've talked about. It's been great.
Nice.
Especially this. Good stuff.
Still having fun.
Go watch the full interview if you don't want to hear the edited podcast version with Andy and Elliot from Poor Pearl's Almanac. That's up on our YouTube. You can see what Dan and I look like. I am hideous. I'll say that. And I have a third eye as well, though, and 2 fingers. So you'll see that in the live stream.
His third eye is not visible on camera, though.
Yeah, I didn't say where it was.
He's not told me where he keeps it yet.
yeah. Next to my crystal ball. So yeah, go watch that. That rocked. Andy and Elliot, again, thanks you guys for coming on. And
next week, something else?
Next week is going to be so good. It was so funny. My dad was like, we should really... Like, it would be really cool if you guys... Yeah.
Okay.
He's like I mean,
really... if your dad wants to come on the podcast, it's fine.
Dad, come on the show. He was like, it'd be really cool if you guys like gave a teaser about what you were going to talk about so people could research it. And I was like, you're implying that we know what we're going to talk about in advance.
I mean, there is a high chance that we may like make a final triumphant return to a certain book.
Yes.
I mean, that probably it's probably due.
Let's just do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you haven't read God, Emperor, Ralph Miliband's Marxism and Politics.
By now, what are you doing?
Get to it. We're going to finish it next week. That's an auxiliary statement, promise. All right, I haven't eaten dinner yet, so I'm going to have food.
All right then. Bon appetit, Jack.
Bon appetit.
I've been Dan.
I have been Jack.
Thank you for listening, everyone. It's an auxiliary statement. Woo.
The music you heard this episode was Music to Kill Bad People To by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. If you like this song, you can check it out and much, much more on their Bandcamp at kinggizzard.bandcamp.com. Be sure and follow us up on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you like what you heard, be sure and tune in next week for some more commie discussion. Till next time.